In a large, stuffy greenhouse, a young, attractive girl was diligently working. She was planting tomato seedlings, carefully loosening the soil, and then watering each planted bush. Her shirt clung to her body from the heat. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead, and strands of curly hair, escaping from under a colorful scarf, were wet. The older women working with her praised the girl. "Good job, Joan. You do your work very well and responsibly. You'll make a good housewife. It's time for you to get married. Have you noticed how Dan looks at you?" Joan straightened her tired back, rubbed her stiff lower back, and laughingly replied, "Why would I need that Dan? He's always following me around, but he's an ill-mannered guy. I don't like him at all. And besides, I love someone else, but that's a secret." "Is that really a secret?" "Everyone in our little town knows that the farmer's son is courting Joan when his parents aren't looking," Shirley thought to herself. After finishing her work, Joan changed into clean clothes, washed up, got on her bike, and rode home to her grandmother. She decided to take the route through the field because it was the shortest way. Besides, she had loved the feeling of freedom since childhood, running through the field with her arms spread wide. Now, she was riding her bike, a gentle breeze blowing on her face and hair, and there wasn't a soul in sight. In the distance, Joan saw the farmer's jeep speeding through the field. When they approached each other, the vehicle came to a sudden halt, and out stepped a tall, slightly heavy-set guy. Joan dropped her bike on the side of the road and hugged her beloved tightly. He kissed her passionately, pulled her close, and said, "Hello, my love. Here we are together at last. Admit it, you missed me." Joan blushed and quietly replied, "Yes, I missed you a lot. Warren, when are we going to stop hiding and tell everyone we love each other? I can't go on like this. It feels like you don't love me, or you're ashamed of me." Warren started to dodge, trying to change the subject, and kissed her even more tenderly on the neck. "Why do you say that? Can't you feel how much I love you? The moment I look at you, I long for our embrace. Aren't we happy together? Look, I got you something in town. You have to try it on." Joan took the bag from his hands, opened it, and pulled out a beautiful lacy white blouse. "Oh, thank you, Warren. It's so beautiful," Joan exclaimed with delight. She put on the blouse and coquettishly asked, "Does this blouse suit me? I have to wear it to a party. I'm sure all the girls will be jealous. Let's go to the party this Saturday, please." "Joan, I can't make it this Saturday. I promised my dad I'd go to an important meeting with him. You can go to the party yourself. Have some fun, but not for too long, or I'll get jealous," Warren said. Joan sighed but didn't argue with her beloved boyfriend. She loved him dearly and was afraid of losing him. The couple embraced and kissed for a long time, and in that moment, Joan was completely happy. With Warren, she forgot about all the hardships in life. She returned home in high spirits, feeling like she hadn't even been tired at work. Her grandmother immediately understood and began to speak disapprovingly. "Oh, Joan, you were with Warren again. Why do you keep doing this? You should be ashamed. He doesn't ask you to marry him or introduce you to his family. When he leaves you and finds another girl, what will you do then?" "Grandma, don't say that. I love Warren very much, and he loves me. Look at what he gave me today. Isn't it beautiful? I've never had such a beautiful blouse. And you say he doesn't love me? I'm sure he'll introduce me to his parents soon. Though I already know them, but not as his fiancé. We will definitely get married. Now, let me help you with something. Shall we go water the flowers in the garden?" Joan said, laughing. Grandma Sally never stayed angry with her granddaughter for long. She hugged her and stroked her head. She worried a lot about Joan. Sally understood that Warren's parents would never accept her granddaughter as their son's fiancée. Unfortunately, in their small town, everyone would quickly find out and gossip about Joan. But the girl seemed not to hear her grandmother. She was eagerly awaiting her next date with her beloved. Joan had fallen in love with Warren from their first meeting, when she had come to apply for a job at his parents' farm. At that time, Warren was just bringing in supplies from town. He looked at her attentively, raised an eyebrow, and even whistled. Then he suddenly winked and whispered to her, "Hi, beautiful. What's your name? I like you." Joan had been very embarrassed and said something incoherent. His father sternly shouted, "Son, stop joking around like that, or I'll have no one to work for me. Don't pay attention to girls like her. And you, don't expect to be socializing with my son. Give me your documents. I'll get you set up for work." Joan apologized, and after that didn't even look at Warren in public, though she liked him very much. He was confident and free-spirited. One day, as she was walking home, it started raining heavily. A car pulled up beside her, with Warren at the wheel. "Hey, beautiful. Get in the car. I'll give you a ride home so you don't get soaked," he shouted. She agreed to get in. Joan was shivering, and suddenly Warren pulled her close, whispered, and kissed her passionately. "You will be mine. I won't let anyone else have you." Joan was quite surprised by his actions, but relaxed in his strong arms. From then on, they started meeting secretly. Warren was a passionate, bold guy who constantly told her he loved only her, and she believed him, as he was her first man and her first love. Joan dreamed that soon Warren would tell his family about their relationship. She worked diligently on the farm to win his mother's favor. After some time, Joan found out she was pregnant. She had been very afraid this might happen, so she and Warren had been careful. But it happened anyway. She wanted to have this baby, as its father was the man she loved. But she was scared and kept thinking, what will happen now? What if Warren's parents refuse our marriage? My grandmother asked me not to disgrace her. I need to tell Warren everything today. We need to decide about the wedding and the baby. Warren reacted very calmly to the news. "How did you get pregnant? Don't worry, I won't leave you alone. Tomorrow, we'll go apply for a marriage license. As for my parents, don't worry. I'm sure they'll yell at first, but then they'll understand." Joan exhaled and hugged her beloved tightly around the neck. "Thank you, Warren. I was so afraid you'd stop talking to me because of this news. You won't regret it. I'll be the best wife ever." The couple, without telling anyone, applied for a marriage license. That evening, Warren told his parents everything. This led to a huge argument at home. His mother yelled at him so loudly that probably everyone in their small town could hear. "What have you done, son? Why marry her? She's a poor girl living with her grandmother. They have no money. She's not suitable for our family. We don't even know who the father of that child is. Maybe she's been seeing someone else. Don't be foolish, or you'll have to earn your own money. Your father and I won't support you." "Mom, why are you saying this? I've already promised Joan our wedding will be in a week. I really love her," Warren protested. "As for Joan, I'll handle everything myself. You don't do anything. There will be no wedding. And there won't be any baby either. I've said everything," his father said harshly. Joan was very happy, knowing she would soon marry her beloved and have a real family. The next day, she came to work early. But before she could change into her work clothes, she saw Troy, Warren's father, appear in the doorway. He looked at her angrily and said sternly, "Joan, come to my office. We need to talk." Joan wasn't surprised. Instead, she was even pleased. She thought he was going to talk about the upcoming wedding. But their conversation was about something entirely different. "Joan, Warren told us everything, even that you're pregnant. Don't think you can use this to become part of our family. It's not going to happen. There won't be a wedding, and we will never acknowledge this child. I'll give you money to get an abortion and leave this town. The farther you go, the better. Do you understand? Now get out of my office. You are no longer employed here," the farmer said harshly. Joan was deeply hurt by these words. She felt humiliated. But why? Warren promised me. We love each other and have already applied for a marriage license. I've never been with any man other than Warren. Why are you doing this to me? I won't kill my baby. It's your grandchild. And I don't want your money. Troy got angry and slammed his fist on the desk. If you don't do as I say, you'll regret it. Tomorrow, everyone in our small town will hear that you've been with different guys and don't even know who the father is. It's your choice how you want to live, but you won't be with Warren. We don't need poor relatives. Get out, or are you deaf? And take your last month's salary. Joan started crying, grabbed the money and documents, and quickly ran out of the office. The other employees were bewildered and silently shook their heads. Joan couldn't believe Warren could betray her. She believed that he wasn't to blame, that his parents had made all the decisions for him. Joan tried calling Warren to talk, but at first, he didn't answer. Eventually, he picked up and said, "Nothing will work out for us. You should get an abortion and leave. I'm not going to fight with my father over this. Sorry. We are both to blame for this." After these words, Warren hung up, and Joan cried bitterly as her whole life changed in an instant. She didn't dare tell her grandmother about the pregnancy, imagining how worried and angry she would be, especially with her heart problems. Joan washed her face and quickly started packing her things. "Forgive me, Grandma. I need to move to another city. It's necessary. I'll find a job there, and everything will be fine. I promise to write to you and call you. I have enough money for now. I got my final paycheck today. Don't see me off. I love you, Grandma," Joan said. They hugged, and her grandmother, crying, said, "What happened? I feel like you're not telling me something. Did you have a fight with Warren? Why did you decide to leave so quickly?" Joan tried not to cry in front of her grandmother and replied with a smile, "Yes, I had a fight with Warren. We broke up. I feel terrible, Grandma. I don't even want to live. That's why I need to leave this small town. Everything will be fine. I'm sure of it." Her grandmother understood what Joan was saying and thought, maybe this is for the best. Those relationships with the farmer's son wouldn't have lasted long anyway. In another city, maybe Joan will meet a decent guy and everything will be okay for her. Grandma took a long time to say goodbye to her granddaughter at the gate of their house. Joan boarded the train, not knowing what to do next. She couldn't hold back her tears. She was scared and unsure how she would manage on her own in a big city, or how she would cope with her pregnancy. Why had Warren betrayed her? It seemed that Grandma had been right all along, and Warren didn't really care about Joan. On the train, sitting opposite her was a plump woman who loved to talk. She began to share stories about herself and her children, and asked Joan why she was crying. Joan decided to tell her everything, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I'm heading to the city for work. I work in the kitchen of a businessman's house. They're good, decent people and always pay on time. They're looking for a maid right now. If you want, you can come with me. Maybe they'll hire you. It's a long shot, but you never know. Just be honest. Tell them everything like you told me. I can see you're a hard worker. They appreciate people who work well and aren't fussy," Debbie suggested. Joan decided to try for the maid job. Debbie seemed trustworthy and sincere. An hour later, they arrived at the businessman's home. It was a comfortable 2-story house with balconies. The yard was beautifully landscaped, with neat pathways and a fountain. The owner met them at the door. Debbie gently nudged the somewhat nervous Joan forward and said, "Good afternoon, Chase. I've brought a potential maid for you. She's a responsible young woman from a small town, not lazy, and she's looking for work. Maybe you could give her a chance. The last maid from the agency only cared about her manicure and did nothing around the house. She even ruined your shirt and jacket while doing the laundry." The owner looked Joan over carefully and said, "I'll wait. Come into my office for an interview. We'll discuss what you can do around the house. Generally, I'm reluctant to hire young girls because they tend to be irresponsible. We need hard workers here. Joan showed her documents and said honestly, I can do any household chores and garden work too. I can work without days off. I promise not to touch any expensive equipment without permission. And I'll consult Debbie for everything. But you probably won't hire me. I can tell by the way you're looking at me. Is it because I'm pregnant? I'm still in the early stages. I know my chances of finding a job are slim since no one wants an employee who can't work after 6 months. But I don't want to lie. That's why I left my small town. My fiancé refused the baby and told me to get an abortion. But I can't kill my child. Joan closed her eyes, expecting to be thrown out of the house. After all, who would want a pregnant employee? But to her surprise, Chase quietly said, Joan, you're in a tough situation right now. But I admire that you chose to keep the baby instead of having an abortion. Not every woman can bear a child. It will be very difficult for you in this big city. You know what? I'll hire you. Initially, it will be for a 3-month trial period. And then we'll see how well you perform. You can stay here. We have a guest house for the staff. And it has everything you need. Debbie will show you around. But I warn you, if you steal or fail to do your duties, you'll be immediately dismissed. Thank you. I won't let you down. I'll work responsibly. You won't regret hiring me, Joan said with a smile. Joan sincerely thanked Debbie and the owner for their kindness. She worked diligently on her first day, and in the evening, she and Debbie had tea in the guest house. The boss agreed to hire you because of your pregnancy. It's a very important topic for him. He and his wife have been unable to have a child for many years. They've tried all sorts of treatments at the most expensive clinics, and even went to healers, but nothing worked. Recently, I overheard that they decided to hire a surrogate to have a baby for them. She'll soon be living here in this house. But for me, it's a very strange decision. Just try not to get involved in their affairs and, most importantly, don't say anything unnecessary to the boss's wife. She's a very difficult woman and often criticizes us. Just agree with her and don't argue. Otherwise, she'll quickly fire you. She has a very tough character. Joan was given a uniform and began working for the businessman's family. She worked hard to keep the house clean and the garden beautiful. The boss was indeed a pleasant and polite man, but his wife was quite the opposite. Initially, she constantly criticized Joan, sometimes seeming to test her. Mara would even inspect the laundry Joan washed and ironed, and if she found any faults, she would immediately reprimand the maid. She would often check for dust with her finger, running it across the surfaces of the furniture. Joan, as Debbie had taught her, agreed with all the criticisms without arguing, fearing she might lose her job. Soon, the surrogate mother, a young and pretty girl named Clarissa, moved into the house. At first, Clarissa felt uncomfortable. Everyone treated her like an incubator. She had a special balanced diet that she had to eat even if she didn't like it. She took various vitamins, was weighed daily, and had to work outside in all kinds of weather. Even a doctor from the hospital came to their home to check on her. Joan felt sorry for her, understanding how hard it was to force oneself to eat or drink when feeling nauseous. One day, Joan overheard Clarissa asking for pickles, and Mara responded irritably, "What whims? The dietitian doesn't approve of salty foods during pregnancy, and there's no benefit to the baby from such food." Joan felt sorry for Clarissa, and remembered she had a small jar of her grandmother's homemade pickles. Seizing a moment when no one was around, she gave the jar to Clarissa. "Here, these are for you. Eat them in good health. Just don't tell anyone I gave them to you, or Mara will scold me. I'm pregnant too, so I understand how you feel." Clarissa smiled at her and thanked her. "Thank you. I really crave salty food, but they keep feeding me fresh salads and fish. I don't want to eat that anymore." Clarissa initially tried to get what she wanted, but no one listened to her. So she decided to change her approach, dressing provocatively in short robes and tops, giving Chase flirtatious looks, and constantly showing him attention. It seemed she did this intentionally to further provoke his already tense wife. When Mara saw Chase gently stroking Clarissa's rounded belly and smiling as he listened to the baby's movements, a terrible scene erupted. "What are you doing here? Chase, what do you think you're doing? Maybe you'll start sleeping with her right in front of me. Why did we even let this shameless girl into our home?" Mara shouted. Chase couldn't stay silent and replied sharply, "Don't shout, Mara. It's bad for our babies, they can hear everything in there. I'm just talking to them. You can touch the belly too and feel them kicking. It's an amazing feeling. Just imagine, soon our little babies will be born, 3 of them, and it's such a joy." Clarissa pretended not to understand why Mara was so angry, though she had been deliberately provoking Chase. Joan watched the whole situation, feeling a twinge of envy. When Mara and Chase's children were born, they would be loved, spoiled, and provided for, while her own baby would have no one but her. What the future held for them was uncertain. The pregnancies of Clarissa and Joan were about the same length, so the two sometimes talked about their fears related to pregnancy and childbirth, but only when no one else was around. About a month before the due dates, a tragedy struck the businessman's family. That day, Chase had left on business and returned home late at night. Joan had heard Mara arguing with Clarissa for a long time in the evening. Following Debbie's advice, Joan decided to go to the guest house to avoid overhearing anything she shouldn't. In the morning, Debbie prepared a special breakfast for Clarissa. Joan, as usual, went to wake her up, but she wasn't in her room, and her bed was made. Joan called the owners, and it turned out that Clarissa had run away during the night. She had taken only her documents and a few belongings. No one knew where to find her. Chase was very distressed and said nervously, "How could this happen? Where did Clarissa go? We only paid her half the money. She broke the contract and will be punished in court for this. What if something happens to my children? The due date is so soon. Why did this have to happen to our family? How can someone be so irresponsible?" It seemed that Mara was also upset, but Joan knew that the businessman's wife was pretending and was actually pleased by the news. The atmosphere in the household was very tense, and Joan found it increasingly difficult to carry heavy items and do her work properly. Joan decided it was time to quit her job, find a place to live, and prepare for the birth of her baby. Chase paid her generously, allowing her to rent a small room. When Joan found herself alone in the tiny, stuffy room that felt more like a closet, she thought again about Warren and his betrayal. Feeling a deep sense of sadness, Joan desperately wanted to return home, to her small town, and to her grandmother. She was completely uncertain about what she would do next. A week later, in the middle of the night, Joan started feeling severe pain in her abdomen and began to bleed heavily. She managed to call an ambulance, opened the door, and then lost consciousness. When she woke up in the hospital, she learned she had experienced a very difficult premature birth. Unfortunately, her baby did not survive, and the doctors struggled to save Joanne's life. Joan cried a lot, feeling utterly empty. Her breasts had filled with milk, causing her intense pain. She wanted to escape the hospital, feeling as if everyone was looking at her with pity. She had failed to bring a healthy baby into the world. However, the doctors couldn't discharge her yet, as she needed treatment following the birth. Hearing the cries of newborn babies all around, seeing the joyful faces of new mothers, and knowing that she would never have that happiness again was incredibly difficult. Joan lay in bed, facing the wall, crying quietly. That day, an elderly orderly approached her and softly said, "Joan, around the same time you gave birth, another young woman did too. She had triplets, all healthy but with low birth weight, so they need to stay in the nursery to gain strength. But this woman didn't even want to hold them or look at them. She said she would give them up, claiming they weren't hers and she didn't want them. Then she ran away from the hospital. Could you feed them? You have milk, and it's better for these poor babies to have breast milk than formula." It will help them grow stronger more quickly. Joan raised her tear-streaked, swollen face and asked suddenly, some people lose their precious child while others abandon healthy babies. Where is the justice in this world? What is this woman's name? I'll feed these babies. It's not hard for me. At least I can find some comfort in helping other children. I need this right now, you understand? I can't hold my own baby, kiss him, or hug him. I understand, Joan. I'm a mother too, and I see how much you're suffering. The woman's name is Clarissa. Do you know her? Maybe she has relatives who would want to take the babies in. They need a home, care, and love, not an orphanage. The orderly said, of course, I know her. Their father is looking for his children. I'll call him right away. But first, let me feed the babies. Where do I need to go? Joan exclaimed. She carefully took a tiny boy from his bed and began to nurse him. Amazingly, the baby knew exactly what to do and eagerly started to suckle. The feeling was indescribable for Joan. She felt both pain and happiness and couldn't hold back her tears. Joan managed to feed all 3 babies, and it made her feel a bit better. She stayed with them a little longer and arranged with the doctor that she will come at specific times to feed the babies. She couldn't stop admiring these babies, enjoying holding them in her arms, stroking their chubby cheeks. Nurses scolded the kind old orderly Lydia. Lydia, what are you doing? Why did you allow Joan to feed these babies? We understand it's beneficial for the infants, but have you thought about her? What will happen to her when she has to part with them? Her own baby just died. It will be very difficult for her to cope. The next day, Joan called Debbie and told her everything, asking her to inform Chase specifically, not Mara. And within half an hour, Chase called Joan. Joan, you can't imagine what you've done for me. Where are you in the hospital? I'll come to you right away. I couldn't believe I'd find my children. And then you shared this wonderful news with me. Don't worry, your babies are fine. I feed them myself. I have plenty of milk now, and they're getting enough. You're a lucky man. And I'm a miserable girl, as I was waiting for the birth of my son. But he died, and now I'm completely useless to anyone. I'm sorry for telling you all this. I'm just in so much pain, Joan said sadly. Chase arrived at the hospital within an hour. He spoke with the hospital's administrator for a long time, showing the contract stating that Clarissa was their surrogate mother, and they agreed to give him the children. He decided to thank Joan, to support her. Joan, I sympathize with you deeply for the loss of your child, but now you need to calm down and think about the future. You're still a young girl. You have a lot ahead of you in life. I have a proposal for you. I suggest you continue working for our family. But now, not as a maid, but as a wet nurse and nanny for my children. I couldn't find a better candidate. You're a reliable, decent, and non-conflict person. I'm sure you'll do great. I'll pay you very well for this job. But if it hurts or it's difficult for you to interact with the children now, or if you don't want to, you can refuse, and I'll understand. No, I agree. On the contrary, when I spend time with the babies, I feel better. I momentarily forget about the death of my child. And I have plenty of milk now, so I can feed your children. Thank you for this offer, but I also have a request for you. Will you help me to bury him? I don't know where to go to arrange it. I'm very scared. The businessman understood everything and agreed to the girl's request. He arranged everything with the funeral agency, and Joan was able to say goodbye to her son, which was very important to her. Finally, Chase's babies grew up, and Joan recovered her health after giving birth. On the day of discharge from the hospital, all the patients were looking out the windows. Chase arrived in a fancy car, with a huge bouquet of flowers and gifts for the doctors. Joan helped him carry the boys to the car, and he proudly carried his daughter. Not seeing Mara, she asked, "Where is the children's mother? Hasn't she come to the hospital?" It's a very important day for your family, Chase replied sadly. Unfortunately, my wife had to leave on an urgent business trip that couldn't be postponed. She's coming home tomorrow. We'll set up your room in the meantime. You'll come straight home with us, won't you? You've become a guardian angel for our children. It's so good that we found them. When Mara comes home, we'll have a real, strong family. I'm sure of it. During this time, a woman who worked in a shop next to the hospital was watching Joan and Chase with interest. Her jaw dropped in amazement, and she immediately called the farmer's wife, her friend, to spill the beans. Holly, you won't believe who I just saw. I saw Joan, the one who used to love your son. She's being picked up from the hospital by a gorgeous man. She gave birth to triplets, and this man is constantly smiling. You were right, Holly, to kick out that audacious girl. It seems those children weren't really yours. She just wanted to marry Warren. And since things didn't work out with Warren, she found herself a new man, a businessman. She's so cunning. And she always seemed like such a decent girl. Holly got very angry and told Warren everything. He still couldn't forget his feelings for Joan. When they were secretly meeting, it seemed to him like just a fling, an adventure. But after she left, he realized he missed her. Other girls didn't make him happy at all. He wanted to hear her laughter again and feel her love. But now it was all over. She was living with another man, and it turned out that his children would call another man their dad. He assumed Joan had given birth to triplets and felt very guilty about how unfairly he had treated her. Meanwhile, Joan continued to work for the businessman's family and spent all her time with the babies. Surprisingly, she managed the triplets excellently, handling everything. Taking care of the babies truly brought her joy. In the evenings, when the owners came home from work, they took the babies to their room for a while. Chase enjoyed playing with them, kissing their feet, and even bathing them. However, Mara, on the contrary, tried to spend as little time with them as possible and struggled to hide her irritation. Of course, her husband noticed this behavior, and it saddened him greatly. Arguments arose between the husband and wife. Mara, look at how Beth makes bubbles out of saliva so amusingly. And Adam and Oliver are constantly holding hands. Sometimes it seems like they know they're brothers. Do you notice how different our children's personalities are? Beth is a very calm girl, but the boys are always demanding something. Darling, take Beth in your arms. Can't you see she's crying? Why do you treat the babies like this? Don't you love them at all? Chase said seriously. The woman smiled slightly and casually picked up the girl. But at that moment, she started crying even more, and Mara immediately put her back on the couch, saying, Chase, why are you saying that? Of course, I love our children. I just need time to get used to them. I'm very tired from work. I have constant meetings and important negotiations, and the nanny does a great job with them. Let them grow up a bit, and then I'll take care of their upbringing. But Chase got nervous and started shouting, I don't understand you, Mara. I thought that when children are born, you'd stop working immediately and take care of them. And you're saying they need to grow up first. No, it shouldn't be like this. Don't you understand that children need a mother, not a nanny? Joan can only help us, but she can't be a mother to our children. This is not the family I dreamed of. The woman realized she was wrong and immediately responded, You're right. I'll take leave from work tomorrow and stay home for a couple of weeks to get used to the children. Everything will be fine. Don't worry. We're a real family. Mara did indeed take leave from work and began to portray herself as a responsible mother. But this performance was only for her husband. As the children grew older, Joan continued to breastfeed them, but the pediatrician advised introducing solid food. Mara said she would feed them herself. She even started taking the children out for walks, taking them briefly, but she always handed them back to Joan for breastfeeding. Mara often talked on the phone with someone named Greg, and before her husband returned from work, She could go somewhere and always came home in a great mood. Lately, Joan had noticed strange behavior in the babies. When they spent time with her, they were always active, could cry loudly, loved playing with toys, and smiled. But when Mara brought them home, the children were lethargic and slept for a long time. This had never happened before. Joan was very worried about the baby's condition because she genuinely loved them and couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to them. She thought for a long time, remembering Debbie's words about not interfering in the host family's affairs. Still, she couldn't stay silent and one day told everything to Chase. Surprisingly, he reacted calmly and didn't scold Joan. "Thank you, Joan, for deciding to tell me everything. I myself have noticed many oddities in Mara's behavior lately. I need to check everything myself. You can go to the children." The businessman thanked her. The girl calmed down but decided to be attentive when dealing with Mara. And on a day off, while his wife was out with the children, Chase installed small cameras in the children's room and in the kitchen. He decided to check everything and find out how his wife spent time with the children while he was at work. And when he reviewed the footage from the cameras a couple of days later, he was shocked to hear her conversation with a man. "Hold on, darling. Don't get nervous. I'll be soon after putting these kids to bed. You have no idea how tired I am of all this. Well, I don't love them. They are strangers to me. I just can't get used to them. It's good that my husband doesn't suspect anything. Can't he see that I don't love him?" Mara laughed. Chase got very angry and clenched his fists. He realized that Mara was cheating on him. But the man also saw on the recording how his wife, while in the kitchen, opened a jar of baby food, looked around as if afraid someone might see her, then took another jar from the cupboard and sprinkled some powder into the puree. She carefully mixed everything and went to feed the children. Chase saw where she hid the jar of powder and decided to have it tested. The contents of the jar were tested very quickly. It turned out to be a high dose of a sedative. Learning this, Chase couldn't contain his emotions. He stormed into their bedroom and started shouting at Mara, "You vile woman. I know everything. You have a lover. How could you cheat on me? You said you wanted children, and now you've decided to kill the babies. Why do you put sedatives in their food? Tell me. We are getting a divorce." Mara wasn't intimidated by her husband's yelling. Instead, she got out of bed and confidently replied, "Well, it's good that you found out everything yourself. Yes, I love Greg. I feel good with him. Unlike with you, there are no crying children in the house. I didn't want these 3 children. It's unbearable. They cry constantly, one after another. My head hurts from them. Is that happiness? It's punishment. I'm leaving you. I've wanted to do this for a long time. And I'm not a criminal. Did I put poison in their food? Because of this sedative, they slept a little longer, and the house was much quieter during that time. I'm not going to waste my time taking care of these children. I'm young and beautiful, and if I stay with you, I'll become a neglected and sad woman." On the same day, Mara moved out of the businessman's house. Chase was very upset. He felt terrible. He filed for divorce. However, Joan and all the household staff in the house were somewhat relieved because no one would scold them anymore. 6 months passed. During this time, Joan became close with the owner, and the children constantly wanted to spend time with her, reaching out to her and saying something resembling "Mama." Chase began to perceive Joan in a completely different light. He saw how sincerely she loved the children, what a good housekeeper she was, and realized that he couldn't find a better mother for his children. And he decided to propose to the girl. "Joan, open this box and try on what's inside. It's an engagement ring for you. Be my wife." You know, after divorcing Mara, I reevaluated my whole life, and I realized that I lived with a cunning and dishonest person. Apparently, I was wrong in choosing a partner. I used to think that a wife should be smart, stunningly beautiful, so I wouldn't be ashamed to go to business dinners with her. But now that you're here, I realize that a woman's true calling is to be a good mother, to be kind and devoted. I didn't even notice how I fell in love with you, and it's you I want to spend my life with." Joan couldn't believe her happiness. She even cried unexpectedly and said, "Chase, is this not a joke? I thought an ordinary girl like me couldn't appeal to such a business-like man like you. I can't imagine my life without Beth, Adam, and Oliver. I agree to be your wife. Let's visit my grandmother with the children. I haven't been there for a long time. I want to tell her everything and invite her to our wedding. You don't mind, do you? She's the only close person to me. She raised me alone and managed to replace my mother." Chase timidly hugged the girl for the first time and replied, "Of course, we can even go tomorrow. I really want to meet her and sincerely thank her for such a wonderful granddaughter. If you want, we can not only invite her to the wedding, but also invite her to live with us. We have a big house. There's enough space for everyone here. It must be difficult for her to manage everything alone by now." Joan kissed the man and, hugging him tightly, said, "You're the best man. I often wonder how she's doing there alone. I live very far away now, and she constantly has high blood pressure and problems with diabetes. I'm sure she'll be happy when we visit her." The next day, Chase's whole family went to meet Grandma. As they entered the small town, Joan began reminiscing about her childhood and youth, realizing that she no longer thought about Warren. After all, now she loved Chase. The curious residents of the small town watched as guests arrived in such an expensive car. Joan nervously opened the gates to her grandmother's house. In the yard, a dog recognized the girl and happily started jumping and wagging its tail. Grandma came out onto the doorstep, wearing warm old clothes, and seeing her granddaughter, she joyfully ran towards her. "Joan, I'm so glad to see you. Finally, you've come to me. I've been constantly looking out the window, waiting for you. How long it's been since you were home. Oh, and whose children are these? Are these my great-grandchildren? How lovely they are. And is this your husband? You didn't tell me anything on the phone. Aren't you ashamed? Come inside. I already have soup ready. We'll have lunch together. You must be hungry after the long journey." Grandma set the table, and everyone sat down to eat and get acquainted. Joan was very worried that Chase wouldn't like their small house, but he, on the contrary, saw this trip as an adventure, ate heartily, talked for a long time with Grandma, and told her all about himself, his life, and how he fell in love with Joan. "Your story is very similar to a plot from my favorite series. My poor granddaughter. How difficult it was for her in this town. And your little ones are so cute. I'm glad, Chase, that everything is fine with you now. But I feel sorry for Joan. After all, her child died. When she left to live in the city, she didn't tell me anything about her pregnancy. If I had known she was pregnant, I wouldn't have let her leave. So, she works as a nanny for you, right?" Chase cleared his throat and continued his story. "Sally, we didn't just come here to visit. I want to ask for your blessing. Joan and I have fallen in love and want to get married, start a family. Would you be okay with that? She loves my children so much, cares for them like their own mother. We are very happy together." Grandma said with some doubt, "I worry about you. What if the woman who gave birth to the children suddenly appears in your home and wants to see the kids, or wants to take them away? Or your ex-wife, who is officially considered their mother, wants to take them? Then my Joan will suffer again. We need to figure this out." "Don't worry, that definitely won't happen. Mara, my ex-wife, didn't love these children at all. They weren't needed for her even before. She herself said she was glad to get rid of them. And their surrogate mother, Clarissa, turned out to be a strange girl. When she was pregnant, she ran away from home and broke the agreement. And when she gave birth to the children, she wrote a refusal in the hospital." Sally turned pale. "Did you say the surrogate mother's name was Clarissa? It can't be." And then Grandma collapsed, clutching her heart. Joan and Chase were frightened and began splashing water on her face. Grandma, what happened? I shouldn't have told me everything. You mustn't get upset. You have a weak heart. Forgive me, it's all my fault, cried Joan. Finally, Grandma Sally opened her eyes, drank water from the glass with trembling hands, sighed, and began to speak softly. You're not to blame for anything, Joan. It's my mistake in life. I'll tell you everything now. You see, this Clarissa is your maternal half-sister. What an incredible coincidence. Your mother was a dishonest woman. Perhaps I couldn't raise her properly. She dated various men and left to live in the big city early on. She loved to drink alcohol and have fun at other people's expense. She brought you to me when you were 6 months old. She said she didn't know who your father was, promised to change her ways, and asked me to let her come home. I forgave her, and we started getting used to living together again. But my daughter only stayed home for a week. She asked me to look after you and said she needed to urgently go to the city on business. Well, I agreed to watch over you, and she left, leaving you with me forever. I was very angry with her. But, Joan, I always sincerely loved you. Then acquaintances told me that my daughter started living with some man again and gave birth to another girl, Clarissa, a year later. And then she started drinking even more alcohol and gave the girl to an orphanage. I was very ashamed when I found out about it. I couldn't understand how my daughter could treat a child like that. At first, I wanted to take my second granddaughter in. But then I was afraid. I understood that I couldn't raise 2 children. I'm already old. I have hardly any money or strength left. And I hated my daughter, and I still can't forgive her. She lived for about 5 more years, and then she died. She had liver problems. I did bury her, but I still can't forgive myself for raising such a person. And I'm ashamed that I didn't take Clarissa in back then. I couldn't tell you all this before, so I lied and said that your mom loved you very much, that she died from a serious illness. I didn't want you to hate your biological mother. And now, when I heard from Chase who gave birth to his children, I felt sick. How I would love to see my granddaughter, hug her, and tell her everything. Joan was shocked. She hugged her grandmother and said, "You're not to blame for anything, Grandma. Every person is responsible for their actions. And I'm not mad at my mom anyway because she gave me a chance to live. Your love and care helped me become a good person. Thank you, Grandma. I would also like to find my biological sister. It's amazing, but we even talked a bit when she lived in Chase's house. But where can I find her now? I know nothing about her." Chase remained silent for a while, then decisively said, "Although I'm angry at the surrogate mother of my children, who turned out to be your sister, I would like to find her and ask why she ran away from my house before giving birth. I thought I would go crazy worrying about the babies, and she ended up doing worse for herself. She never received the money for carrying the children. I still don't understand why she decided to run away if she later refused the kids herself. It's a foolish act. You know what? I'll hire detectives and let them find her. Maybe we'll succeed." Joan was thrilled, thanked Chase, and then turned to her grandmother. "Grandma, we wanted to offer you to move in with us. We have a big house, and I'll feel much calmer knowing you're with us. You won't have to worry about housework." "Oh, thank you. I won't refuse your offer. I'm so tired of being alone in this house. And I'll have more fun. And I can help you with the grandchildren. I can't get used to living alone. I just can't leave the dog and the cat here. They've been living with me for many years." Grandma replied tearfully. Chase laughed and said, "Great. Don't leave anyone behind. We'll take everyone with us. I have a big yard. There's enough space for everyone. Sally, we'll make sure you feel at home with us. And I wanted to thank you so much for raising such a wonderful granddaughter as Joan. Now we're all one family, and we should be together, all together." A week later, Grandma moved into Joan and Chase's house. Sally was pleased. She constantly admired the beautiful house and cozy room where she now lived. The kids loved her too. She told them stories and sang songs. Joan and Chase were preparing for the wedding. They had already booked a restaurant and were discussing the menu. Just then, detectives called them and informed that they found Clarissa. She's currently at their agency but refuses to meet Chase. She's very afraid he won't forgive her for running away from home. But she really wants to see her sister and hopes to meet her. Joan was very happy with this news and said to Chase, "I'm going to the detective agency immediately. I'll convince Clarissa to come home with us. She doesn't know that her grandmother is also here. I just ask one thing of you, my love. Don't scold her too much. I'm sure she ran away for a reason, not just because. And anyway, everything turned out well. We have a family now. The kids are with us. Nothing bad happened to them. Let's forgive her. After all, she's my sister, the closest relative. I don't know. We'll see." Chase replied discontentedly. Joan went to the detective agency and saw a frightened Clarissa. The girls hugged and cried like little girls. "Sister, my dear sister, how good it is that the detectives were able to find you, and that Grandma told me about you. And you know, back then, in Chase's house, we didn't become friends for nothing, did we? I thought it was strange at the time because we didn't know each other at all. But we started talking so easily. Tell me about yourself. I want to know everything. You grew up in an orphanage, right? I can imagine how hard it was for you to live there. Do you remember our mom? What was she like?" "I don't remember her at all. Grandma raised me. She wanted to take you with her, but she was afraid she couldn't provide for both of us. Forgive me, sister, and don't be angry with Grandma. She worried all her life that she couldn't take you in." Joan whispered. Clarissa sighed and replied, "I'm also glad, Joan, that I have you now, someone dear to me. I don't remember our mom either, but they told me at the orphanage that she brought me to them and left, that she was drunk and cried for a long time. But I was lucky. I was adopted. They were very good people. I consider them my real parents. But that woman who gave birth to me and rejected me, I can't call her my mom. Sorry. I'm not angry with Grandma, and I really want to meet her. A year ago, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. My parents were simple people. My mom worked as an accountant, and my dad as an electrician. We were an ordinary family, and we didn't have money for expensive treatment. And the course of chemotherapy that was prescribed to my dad by insurance didn't help him at all. That's when I decided to become a surrogate mother. I thought I could earn a lot of money and help my dad with treatment. I successfully passed the examination at the hospital, and I was entered into the database. Then the family of those businessmen we met contacted me. I probably didn't realize what I was agreeing to then. It just seems that it's all easy to carry someone else's children and give them to the parents. But it turned out differently. It turned out that being pregnant with 3 children at once is very difficult. And realizing that you'll have to give birth to these babies and then give them away is unbearable. Throughout the pregnancy, you feel how the children move in your stomach. You understand that you are one with them, but you're treated as an incubator. For some reason, I felt offended to be in that house. I thought it was all very unfair. I even tried to seduce the father of the children. It seemed strange to me that I would be having his children, and he didn't even touch me. But Chase didn't seem to notice me. He only talked to me about the kids, stroked my stomach, and dreamed of when he would finally see his little ones. In general, I wasn't ready for this. And then his wife started to intimidate me. Those kids were unnecessary to her. She thought I was her rival. She was afraid that Chase would fall in love with me. And on that evening when I disappeared, Mara started screaming at me and kicking me out of the house, threatening me. Mara said that if I voluntarily disappeared from their lives, she would pay me a good sum of money. But if not, she would kill me and the kids. So I got scared and ran away from there, especially since I really needed the money. I decided to stay with a friend for a while. After all, my parents don't know anything about this. And I was able to save my dad by transferring money for his surgery in time. Now he's in remission and recovering. But when I started giving birth, my friend called emergency services, and they took me to the hospital. I realized that I couldn't show up at my parents' house with 3 children. If my dad found out about it, he would probably die of shame. That's why I refused the kids at the hospital. I still feel like a horrible person. First, I broke the contract. Then I left the kids at the hospital. And I deceived Chase. I just didn't know what to do. That's why I don't want to go to Chase's house. I don't know how to communicate with him. Joan, you were pregnant too, right? Who did you give birth to? A boy or a girl? Joan couldn't hold back her tears. Recalling those dark days, I have no one. My son died at birth. But it so happened that I first became a wet nurse and nanny for Chase's children. And now I'm their mom. And soon Chase will be my husband. Sister, may I give you some advice? You should ask Chase for forgiveness. It's the right thing to do. I'm sure he will forgive you. Think about my advice. And your grandmother is waiting for you at home. So, decide and come to us. We are family now. You can't hide from Chase forever. We are all waiting for you, Clarissa. But now I need to go. The children are waiting. By the way, one more important question. Do you regret signing away the children? Although they aren't biologically yours, you did give birth to them. Clarissa shook her head. You're right. They are not my children. I realized that immediately after the birth. I didn't feel any maternal instinct. So, don't worry. I won't make a fuss. I have no rights to the children. I signed them away at the hospital. And I'm very happy that you became their mom. You're a kind and gentle person. I'm sure the kids will be happy with you. I also hope to find my own love someday. But for now, I don't want any children. Neither mine nor others. I plan to focus on my education and find a good job. 2 weeks passed, and Joan and Grandma were very worried because Clarissa still hadn't come. Joan was very upset. She really wanted to connect and be friends with her. I knew she wouldn't come. She seemed very strange to me from the start. She doesn't care about her sister or her grandmother, Chase said. But one day, someone rang the doorbell. Joan opened the door and was surprised to see Clarissa. They hugged, and Joan, smiling, said, "I'm so glad you decided to come. Let's go. I'll introduce you to Grandma." Clarissa looked around and noticed the 3 babies happily playing in a playpen. They were babbling and engrossed in their games. Clarissa looked at the children and realized she felt nothing for them. To her, they were just cute babies, nothing more. She quietly said, "Wait. I want to talk to Chase first. Where is he? Maybe he won't allow me to stay. I'll understand his decision. It's my fault." Joan led her sister to Chase's office. He was going through financial reports. Seeing Clarissa, he frowned and took off his glasses. Joan left the office, knowing they needed to talk things out. Clarissa spoke to him sincerely and asked for forgiveness. "I know, Chase. It's my fault. I shouldn't have run away from this house. But I didn't know what to do. And your wife threatened me. She said she would find a way to get rid of me and the children if I didn't disappear. So, I acted out of fear. Please forgive me. I know I was irresponsible." Chase put his glasses on the table and said, "I thought I would go crazy. I was so worried about the babies. God, Clarissa, why didn't you tell me everything right away? I would have handled it with my wife. But it's too late to talk about that now. I'm glad everything turned out okay in the end. Joan asked me to forgive you. So, come by any time. I don't mind. And even though you broke the contract, I got the children. So, I want to pay you the remaining amount I owe you per our agreement. Which account should I transfer the money to?" "No, I refuse. I don't need any money. I agreed to the deal with your wife. She paid me well to leave that evening. You owe me nothing. It wouldn't be fair. I hope you can forgive me someday. That's what matters most to me. After everything that happened, I won't want children for a long time. And I will never agree to be a surrogate mother again. It's a huge responsibility. I wasn't ready for it. Chase saw that she was sincere. He approached her, extended his hand, and said, "I'm glad you understand that now. I forgive you. Now, go to Grandma. She's been eagerly waiting for you." The reunion between Grandma and her granddaughter was warm and emotional. They hugged and cried. Finally, Sally stopped worrying about not being able to raise Clarissa. Then they all went to have lunch together. Joan was delighted that she now had such a big, loving family.